The silverware trembled against fine china as Marcus slammed his palm on the white linen tablecloth. His mother, Diane, stood beside him with that practiced sneer she'd weaponized for decades. His sister, Cassandra, aimed her phone camera like a loaded gun, while his brother Preston blocked the restaurant's side exit. They had Elena cornered at her window table in the elegant Boston steakhouse, surrounded like prey. "Look at this," Marcus announced loud enough for nearby tables to hear. My pathetic ex-wife, pretending she belongs somewhere with actual class. "What did you do, Elena?" "Borrow money from friends to afford one nice meal before you crawl back to whatever hole you're living in now." Elena's hands remained steady as she set down her wine glass. 8 months since their divorce, and here he stood with his entire family, staging this public ambush during what was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday dinner. Her guest was running late, but Marcus didn't need to know that detail. "You always were delusional," Diane added, her voice dripping with aristocratic contempt. "I warned Marcus from the beginning that marrying someone from your background was social suicide. A woman with no pedigree, no connections, no breeding. And look how right I was. You dragged him down for 6 years." Other diners had stopped eating. Several phones appeared, capturing the confrontation. Elena recognized the calculated malice in their timing. They wanted witnesses for this public execution. "At least Olivia understands how to be a proper partner," Cassandra chimed in, still recording. "She doesn't question his business trips or complain about networking dinners. She actually supports a man's career instead of being dead weight." Elena felt her pulse quicken but maintained her neutral expression. They assumed she was still the broken woman who'd signed those divorce papers 8 months ago, tears streaming down her face in that lawyer's conference room. They had no concept of who she'd become since then. "Nothing to say?" Preston laughed, his bulky frame casting a shadow across her table. "Where's all that fire you had during the divorce proceedings? All those lawyers and demands? Now you're just sitting here alone, exactly what you deserve." "Nothing." The restaurant manager approached hesitantly, but Marcus dismissed him with the arrogant wave of someone who believed wealth granted immunity. "We're having a private family conversation. My ex-wife doesn't mind. She's quite familiar with being put in her place." Then the atmosphere shifted like air, pressure dropping before a storm. The manager's expression transformed from concern to something approaching reverence as he looked toward the entrance. The brass-trimmed doors opened, and immediate silence rippled through the dining room like a physical force. A man entered with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, it commanded it. His charcoal suit was bespoke, cut to perfection. His cufflinks caught the candlelight, pieces Elena knew were worth most people's annual salaries because she'd been present when he selected them at auction. Dominic Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Global Technologies, walked directly toward their table with unmistakable purpose. At 37, he'd revolutionized telecommunications and built an empire valued at $18 billion. But it wasn't his wealth that made Marcus's family instinctively step backward. It was the cold fury radiating from his typically warm gray eyes as he assessed the scene, his wife surrounded by hostile strangers. "Darling," Dominic said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made Preston physically retreat from the exit. "My apologies for the delay. The Singapore merger talks ran longer than anticipated." He leaned down and kissed Elena's temple with obvious familiarity, then straightened to his full 6'3" height, positioned protectively beside her chair. "I see you've encountered some unpleasant company." Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Diane's hand clutched her designer purse with white knuckles, her face draining of color as recognition hit. This was Dominic Ashford. The Dominic Ashford who'd been featured on magazine covers worldwide. Just last month, after his company's groundbreaking satellite technology launch. You. This can't. Marcus stammered, looking frantically between Elena and Dominic. This isn't real. Mrs. Ashford, the restaurant manager, interjected smoothly, appearing at Elena's other side with visible relief. Would you prefer I have security remove these individuals? We absolutely do not permit harassment of our distinguished guests. Mrs. Ashford. The title detonated like a grenade. Cassandra's phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless hands, clattering across the polished floor. The sound echoed in the shocked silence. That won't be necessary, Richard, Elena said, finally standing with fluid grace. She smoothed her midnight blue dress, the one Dominic had surprised her with last week, though she'd purchased dozens of designer pieces with her own earnings from her thriving consultancy firm. They were just preparing to leave. Weren't you? Dominic's arm circled Elena's waist naturally, his platinum wedding band catching the light. It matched the one on her finger perfectly, the set they'd chosen together 4 months ago during a private ceremony in Santorini, surrounded only by people who genuinely loved them. Marcus Grant, Dominic said conversationally, though something dangerous lurked beneath the polite tone. I know precisely who you are. The man who betrayed my wife, Dominic continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire space. The man who attempted to conceal assets during divorce proceedings. The man who genuinely believed he could leave her with nothing and face no consequences. He smiled, but it held no warmth. Tell me, how did that strategy work out? I understand your investment firm lost the Carmichael portfolio last quarter, and the Henderson Group terminated their contract with you as well. Fascinating how quickly reputation affects business, isn't it? The truth was written across Marcus's face in real time, his confident swagger, crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. His company was hemorrhaging clients. The success he'd walked in here boasting about was illusory, built on credit and desperation. He'd come here to crush someone he assumed was vulnerable, only to discover she'd ascended to heights he couldn't reach with a telescope. 8 months earlier, Elena had believed her life was complete. She'd stood in their kitchen, the one in the historic brownstone they'd renovated, together preparing Marcus's favorite meal. The lamb was roasting, imported wine was breathing, and she'd even driven across town for those ridiculously expensive French pastries he preferred. Her phone buzzed with a fraud alert she'd activated on their shared accounts. Another charge at the Fairmont Hotel. Strange. Considering Marcus had texted that he was working late at the office on the quarterly reports, Elena had confronted Marcus that night, discovered the affair with Olivia, his firm's paralegal, and endured his cruel speech about outgrowing her. The divorce had been vicious. Marcus and his family had tried to paint her as a gold digger, despite Elena having abandoned her own promising career in architecture to support his investment firm during its critical startup years. But Elena had rebuilt herself. She'd launched her own consulting business, helping companies with sustainable urban development projects. Within 6 months, she was thriving. She'd met Dominic at an environmental technology conference where she was the keynote speaker. He'd approached her afterward, genuinely interested in her ideas, not her appearance or availability. Their relationship had developed naturally over months of genuine connection. Dominic had supported her business without trying to control it, celebrated her victories without feeling threatened, and loved her for exactly who she was, not who he wanted to shape her into becoming. Now, watching Marcus's family realize the magnitude of their miscalculation, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced during the divorce proceedings. Peace. Not satisfaction or vindictiveness, but genuine peace. She'd won not by destroying them, but by building something better. I believe you should leave, Dominic said quietly. And if you ever approach my wife again at her office, our home, or anywhere else, you'll deal with legal consequences that will make your current business troubles seem trivial. As Marcus's family turned to leave, Diane made one final desperate attempt at salvaging something. "You'll regret this, Elena. When he tires of you, when you're alone again, like Olivia tired of Marcus 3 months ago?" Elena interrupted calmly. "I heard she left him for a senior partner at the firm." Interesting how patterns repeat themselves. The direct hit landed perfectly. Marcus's face flushed crimson as the truth of his abandoned relationship became public knowledge. The woman he destroyed his marriage for had discarded him the moment better. Opportunities appeared. Several diners began applauding as Marcus's family retreated toward the exit. They'd witnessed the complete reversal of the woman who'd been attacked and surrounded, and emerged victorious through dignity rather than cruelty. As the family disappeared into the Boston night, Elena sank into her chair, hands trembling slightly with residual adrenaline. Dominic immediately sat beside her, his hand finding hers under the table. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I'm perfect," she whispered, realizing the truth of it. That was exactly the closure I needed. The manager approached with champagne. "Compliments of the house, Mrs. Ashford. That was quite remarkable." Other diners stopped by their table throughout the evening offering support, sharing their own stories of overcoming betrayal, thanking Elena for her grace under pressure. One woman in her 60s paused beside them, tears in her eyes. "My ex-husband did something similar 20 years ago. Watching you stand up to them with such dignity. Thank you for showing me what I wish I'd been able to do." After the attention subsided, Elena and Dominic finally enjoyed their dinner. The food was excellent, but the conversation was better discussing everything except the confrontation. Future plans, an upcoming charity gala, their upcoming vacation to New Zealand. "Did you genuinely not know they'd be here?" Dominic asked over dessert. Elena smiled mysteriously. A mutual acquaintance may have mentioned Marcus was planning something. "I thought facing them one final time would provide closure." "Full circle. You could have warned me. Where would the entertainment value be in that?" She laughed. "Besides, you were magnificent. Very protective billionaire husband." "I meant every word about the legal consequences," Dominic said seriously. "They won't bother you again." "They won't," Elena agreed confidently. "They're fundamentally cowards. They only came tonight because they assumed I was vulnerable and alone." Her phone lit up with notifications. The confrontation was already spreading across social media platforms. Cassandra's attempted recording had backfired spectacularly. Instead, other diners had captured the family's humiliation and Elena's composed response. Comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Over the following weeks, the incident created unexpected opportunities. Elena's consulting firm received numerous inquiries from clients who'd seen the video and admired her composure under pressure. 2 major corporations reached out about long-term partnerships. A publisher contacted her about writing a book on sustainable urban development. Marcus faced immediate consequences. His investment firm's remaining clients withdrew their portfolios after the video went viral. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who publicly attempted to humiliate his ex-wife while she was dining peacefully. 3 months later, Elena received a handwritten letter from Marcus. She almost discarded it unopened, but curiosity prevailed. "Elena, I don't expect forgiveness or sympathy. I just needed you to understand that I finally comprehend what I lost. Not the money or status, but you, the person who believed in me when nobody else did. You were extraordinary, and I spent 6 years trying to diminish that light because deep down, I feared you'd eventually outshine me. You did anyway. Be happy with Dominic. He sees what I was too insecure to appreciate." Marcus. Elena showed the letter to Dominic that evening. "Do you want to respond?" "No," she said, feeding it into the fireplace. That chapter is completely closed. 6 months later, at her consulting firm's expansion celebration, Elena addressed a room filled with clients, partners, and environmental activists. Dominic watched from the front row, pride evident in his expression. "A year ago, I thought betrayal had ended my story," Elena began. "But I learned something crucial. Sometimes the worst moment becomes the catalyst for discovering your true strength. I'm not grateful to my ex-husband for betraying me, but I'm grateful for the resilience I found, the business I built, and the love I discovered I deserved, real love that builds rather than diminishes." The standing ovation lasted several minutes. As they drove home that night, Dominic took her hand. "Any regrets?" "None whatsoever," Elena said. "Everything happened exactly as it should have. Even that scene at the restaurant was necessary. They needed to witness what they'd lost. And I needed to confirm they had zero power over me anymore. The best revenge," Elena had learned, wasn't destruction. It was building a life so magnificent that the betrayal became merely a footnote in a much larger, more beautiful story. A story she was still writing, surrounded by genuine love, meaningful work, and unlimited possibilities. The end asterisk. "All species have stress responses," Dexian said, scales rippling with dismissive color patterns. "Sure," Nomad nodded agreeably. "How many of them involve a 40% strength increase, pain suppression, time dilation perception, and the overwhelming urge to fight everything in reach until the threat stops existing?" No one answered. "That's called adrenaline," Nomad continued. "We make it naturally. We're literally walking around with combat drugs in our bloodstream, and they only activate when we're scared or angry." She looked around the room. "Which, if you landed on Earth without preparation, you'd be." Immediately. Kashari made a sound her translator didn't even attempt to process. Veeth tried to regain control. "Cadet Nomad, while your perspective is illuminating, I must insist we return to wait." The Felkaw cadet's sensory fur stood on end. "You said you left because it was too easy." "Yeah. How?" Dexian demanded. "How is any of that easy?" Nomad looked at him like he'd asked why water was wet. "Because I'm from there," she said simply. "That's just normal." The auditorium's environmental systems hummed in the silence. "Normal?" Kashari repeated faintly. "Look," Nomad said, almost gently, "you're thinking about Earth as a deployment zone. Hostile territory. Somewhere you'd send soldiers with full gear and evacuation protocols." She leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "For me, that's home. That's where I learned to walk. The gravity you think is crushing? That's what made my bones. The atmosphere you think is corrosive? That's what I breathe. The predators you think are apex threats? Some of them we domesticated. The rest we just avoid. Or don't. Depends on the day." Veeth's tactical assessment protocols were screaming warnings his conscious mind was trying very hard to ignore. "The question isn't why no one comes back from Earth," Nomad said, standing finally. At full height, she was average for a human, which put her at exactly the wrong size to trigger either protective or predatory instincts in most species. Just wrong enough to register as other. The question is why any human ever leaves. She picked up her datapad. "And the answer to that," she said, walking toward the exit, "is worth thinking about." The door sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Veeth stared at the spot where she'd been sitting, then at the class, then at his lecture notes, which suddenly seemed very theoretical. "Dismissed," he said quietly. No one moved for 17 seconds. Later, in the corridors, Kashari caught up with Dexian. His scales still rippled with unsettled patterns. "She's exaggerating," he said, not quite believing himself. "She has to be." "Which part?" Kashari's mandibles clicked nervously. Dexian pulled up his datapad, showing Earth's atmospheric composition, gravitational constant, biodiversity index. The numbers looked wrong. "All of them." "All of it," he said. "It has to be all of it." But his scales had already shifted to the color his species, reserved for recognizing a superior predator, and in the back of his mind, a new question formed. If Earth was that dangerous and humans considered it easy, what did that make humans? Kashari's pheromones provided the answer before either of them could articulate it. Terrifying. Veeth, alone in his office, filed an incident report that would never reach command. He'd been teaching too long to believe documentation mattered when it came to humans. Instead, he updated his personal notes on Earth's quarantine protocols. Status: justified. Addendum: possibly insufficient? He thought about Nomad's smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and added one final note. Recommend psychological evaluation for any human cadet claiming their homeworld was too easy. Either they're dangerously unstable, or they're telling the truth. Either possibility is concerning. He filed the report, knowing it would change nothing. Humans were already here, already integrated into galactic civilization, and they'd all left a planet that killed everyone else who visited it. The question wasn't whether they were dangerous. The question was what they were still capable of, now that they were somewhere easier to survive. The combat simulation lab smelled like ozone and fear sweat from 6 different species. Nomad arrived early, she always did, and was already running diagnostics on the resistance trainer when the others filtered in. Vexian entered with 3 of his clutchmates, scales shimmering with the particular shade of green that meant aggressive confidence. He'd spent the night after Veeth's lecture doing research. Bad idea. 1.6 times standard, he announced, reading from his datapad. Earth's gravitational constant. Impressive for a developmental environment, certainly, but hardly the nightmare fuel you implied. Nomad didn't look up from calibrating the machine. He looked it up. Cute. Mathematics don't lie. Vexian's tail swept in a dismissive arc. My species evolved on 1.2 standard. We adapt to higher gravity in 3 cycles of acclimatization training. Your homeworld's pull is merely 25% beyond comfortable parameters. Sure, Nomad stepped onto the platform. What's your bone density? Vexian's scales rippled confusion. Standard for Petilia-class species. 72 on the Mo scale. Mine's 140. She tapped commands into the interface. Not because I'm special. Because if you grow up hauling your own skeleton around at 1.6 G, your bones are either reinforce or you don't survive childhood. Every human who makes it to adulthood has a frame that would register as military-grade enhancement in your species. The resistance trainer hummed to life. Nomad gripped the handles. This is set to standard Earth normal, she said. Want to try? Vexian's clutchmates shifted backward. Prey spacing again. A Velocian cadet crystalline structure. Mathematical genius. Terrible at reading social cues drifted closer. The gravitational differential would affect more than skeletal structure. Cardiovascular demands. Muscular efficiency ratios. Proprioceptive calibration. Her fractal eyes refracted concern. How do you function in reduced gravity without constant recalibration? Poorly. Nomad released the handles and hopped down. The impact of her landing made the deck plating ring like a struck bell. Several cadets flinched. First month off-world, I broke 3 door panels. Shattered a chair just by sitting down, and accidentally sent a training instructor to medical because I forgot to compensate during a grappling drill. You injured an instructor? Kashari had entered silently, mandibles tight with what her species considered morbid fascination. Dislocated shoulder. He's fine now. Nomad stretched, joints popping like small arms fire. He knows I didn't mean it. Everything here is just so breakable. Vexian's scales flushed pale yellow unease. We're not breakable. We're simply optimized for our environmental. You're breakable, Nomad interrupted. Not rudely, factually. Your combat doctrine emphasizes evasion and precision, because you can't afford sustained physical engagement. Mine emphasizes persistence because we could punch through your defensive positions with bare hands if we had to. Different evolutionary priorities. She walked to the equipment locker, pulled out what the Academy classified as a medium-weight training implement, 40 kilograms of composite alloy. She tossed it from hand to hand like a child's toy. We had to invent rules, she said, for how hard we're allowed to play. Sports where the objective is inflicting controlled damage on each other. We do this for fun. She set the weight down carefully, because if we didn't have outlets, we'd break everything. Accidentally. The Velocian's fractals spun in agitated patterns. Your atmospheric composition. Oxygen percentages nearly double our optimal range. The oxidative stress alone made our metabolism aggressive, Nomad agreed. We burn fuel fast. Heal fast. Think fast when we need to. Your species has elegant energy conservation. Ours is redundancy and overkill built into every system because the planet kept trying new ways to kill us. And we kept refusing to die. Kashari's pheromones had shifted again, something that translated approximately as odd horror. You mentioned predators yesterday. You said you domesticated them? Dogs. Nomad's expression softened, first genuine warmth anyone had seen from her. Wolf descendants. Domesticated about 15,000 years ago. Apex pack hunters. Bite force that could crack your chitin, Kashari. We bred them for companionship. You domesticated something that could kill you? We domesticated lots of things that could kill us. Horses half-ton muscle and panic that could shatter ribs with a kick. Cats miniature ambush predators with switchblade claws. We looked at the most efficient killers on our planet and said, but what if they liked us instead? She paused. Worked, mostly. Sometimes they still kill us anyway. We keep them around regardless. Dexian's datapad clattered to the floor. He'd been scrolling through Earth's biological index. There are mammals on your planet that mass over 40 metric tons. Predatory fish larger than a salt craft. Reptiles that can hold their breath for 2 hours underwater and have bite force measured in. His translator stuttered. How did your species reach the top of this food chain? We didn't. Nomad picked up his datapad, handed it back. We're not apex predators. We're endurance hunters. We can't outrun anything worth hunting. Can't outclimb, outswim, outfight most of the dangerous fauna. She smiled that empty smile. So we just followed them. For hours. Days sometimes. Walked after them until they collapsed from exhaustion and overheating. Ben killed them with rocks. Silence.